God bless you all this afternoon. Grateful to be here with another clergy conversation. And I'm happy to have my friend and big bro who just became a doctor, official doctor with his doctoral degree as well. He is a great preacher, great pastor, great leader, and most of all, he's a great mentor. And I know this from personal experience because he mentors me. So listen, without further ado, let me introduce my brother, Dr. Eric R. Tarver. Thank you so much, big bro, for being with us on today.
Pastor Brown, thank you for the invitation. I know that we have been trying to get this done for actually the past year and a half, and I know some things came up last year to where we had to cancel. We kept postponing, but I'm glad that we had time to fit it within our schedule today, and I thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just get right into it. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I am, as you said, Eric Tarver. I'm a native of Bastrop, Texas, a suburb 25 miles east of Austin. That is actually now a suburb of Austin, Bastrop, and I grew up in church. I was one of those kids who were drugged to church because their mama had a drug problem. She drugged me to BTU. She drugged me to Sunday school. She drugged me to morning worship. And when she had to work, her mother had a drug problem, and her older children had a drug problem. And, so I grew up in the church at the Macedonia First Baptist Church of Bastrop, Texas, where the church is still currently pastored by the Dr. C.A. Williams of 57 years of his pastoral ministry. I started preaching at the age of 11. I should say that I professed hope in Christ at age seven, and then I started preaching at the age of 11. March the 15th, 1987 is when I announced my call. March the 22nd, a week later, preached my first sermon. Graduated from Bastrop High School, class of '93. Started pastoring my first church after high school, and here we are. I'm the husband of Dawn, the father of Quincy, the grandfather of Alea and Titus, and I am the baby of my family, along with the twin sister. If there's more that I need to indulge,
Well, no, we'll get further into it. So you say you were baptized at the age of 7. Your profession of Christ at
yes.
the age of 7.
Mhm.
So how would what made you yourself feel the need to unite with Christ? Because we know a lot of times people are told to do without making that public confession. So what was it for you? What moved upon your heart to actually make that public confession?
Well, first of all, I grew up in a church where my pastor allowed children to serve in ministries even before they were made a profession of faith. And some may not agree with that, but he was always under the impression that if you get them in, get them to working, kind of let them, make that profession in time. I knew that when I was 7,
Hmm.
that I needed to make Jesus my Lord and Savior,
Yes, sir.
especially hearing the gospel that he that believeth in me shall be saved, and all of that, and that if I wanted to make heaven my home and needed to receive Christ and allow him to become my Lord. And
Mhm.
so just hearing those lessons in Sunday school, BTU, hearing the sermons,
Yes, sir.
and even going and to revival and hearing revival, and just um, seeing the invitation being extended, especially just not wanting to die outside the will of God and go to hell. I knew I needed to to receive Christ, and so that was really my conviction, and I wanted um, to do it at that time. I knew I was ready. I
Yes,
knew I
sir.
was. I should say by way of by way of confession. It should have been done before the age of 7. Our church is a 2-story church, A-frame church, and a lot of the older kids would scare us out of baptism. And, and I say that because in the upstairs area of the baptistry, it was real dark, and so they would always say that it was a monster upstairs and all, and don't go up there and this, that, and the other, and whenever we would just kind of be around the church for meetings and all, we would go, to the steps in certain area, just little kid stuff, and so my pastor took me up there one time and just kind of gave him the grand tour of the area. He said, look, son, he said, there's nothing up here. He said, so there's no need to be scared. So that was another reason why, knowing that it wasn't a monster up in the baptistry area, but also wanting Christ inside my heart.
Yes, sir. Well, I love that confession. But you said you started preaching at 11 years old. So definitely share with us that. And the reason I asked that is because, as you know, because you've been around the ministry longer than myself, but we know the times, as you have said, that when, that we know that sometimes when a person confesses to that type of call at an early age, it can be a blessing, but it also can be a heavy burden. So talk about, your confession and the experiences that you had at that early age.
Wow. Well, I I was wrestling with my call at the age of 9.
Wow. Yes, sir.
I started wrestling with my call at the age of 9, and it's not that I come from a family of preachers. Um, and I'll get more into that if time allows. But I was wrestling with my call at the age of 9, and I'm gonna be honest with you. Got tired of running. Got because I think that the Lord will deal with us if we do not do what He wants us to do.
Yes, sir.
And it's just like you know, I was stopped in my tracks
Yes, sir.
at the age of 11, especially during that time. And really, right around January of '87, I told the Lord, I said, Lord, just give me, just a little bit more time, and I said, I'll do it. I said, because I was still searching, still looking for signs. And so, um, my twin sister and I shared a room at my mom's house. We had bunk beds, and her and I were doing homework. Um, we're doing homework, and that evening there was a cross emblazoned on the wall. She couldn't see it. I could see it clear as day. I mean, I could see it clear as day, and I heard a voice that said, "Go preach." I mean, just audibly, and I'm trying to convince her to look at the wall. She could in my mind, and it was just something inside of me, especially after hearing that voice. And so the the next day at school, and I was in middle school at that time. Of course, they call it junior high or now middle school, and I was in class. I was in my math class, and one of my classmates was the granddaughter of a well-respected pastor who actually allowed me to preach and all that after I announced my call, and he was a mentor to younger preachers. And so she looked at me and she said, Eric, I know something's not right, with you. She said, since you've been in class, you have just been on a date. She said, you just, so she said, tell me what's going on. And of course, let's talk about it. So I was writing her a note about my experience. But the teacher confiscated the note. I won't get it. It was kind of funny, but anyway. And so we had another class. And so I wrote in shorthand, if you would, what was going on with me. And so she told me to just pray about it, and ask the Lord for guidance. Now, mind you, I had not shared this with anybody. I had not shared with anybody. And so um, that um, that day, after school, one of my friends, who actually a cousin of mine, who was a teenage preacher, Ron Moore and I were walking. Um, I was going home, and we cut through the football practice field. And I was going home, and I was telling him what was going on with me. And so the first thing he asked me if I had told my pastor, I said, no, not yet. He said, man, you really need to tell CA. He said, CA needs to know what's going on. And he said, you need to tell him and tell him what's going on with you. So, he can kind of just kind of guide you to where, that you need to be. And so it is. He and I were walking. He lived on the south side of town. I live on the north side. The tracks separated the two areas, and he had a ways to go. I had a ways to go. And so he said, well, let's pray. And so right in the middle of the football field, the practice field, he and I prayed. Well, at that time, it started raining. And, I'm walking home. I mean, I don't have any raincoat. So, I mean, I'm walking home. And so, needless to say, the next evening, which was on a Wednesday evening, we had auxiliary meetings at the church.
Mm-hmm.
And the youth met, and, all the auxiliary brotherhood mission and all. And then we had prayer meeting and Bible study. And so I was determined to let my pastor know. I've been trying to call him before Wednesday, but he was out of town. And so I finally got to the church. And so I was nervous. I was scared, So after church, right at the main doors, I told him, I said, Pastor, I said, I didn't heard from the Lord. And he's telling me to go preach. And he said, preach. And so he said, well, he says, I'm not surprised. He says, here's what I want you to do. He says, I want you to ask the Lord for another sign. He said, I want you to go home. I want you to pray. And I want you to go to bed, And so I did. So that next morning, my grandmother stayed with us. And so I went into a room. I saw her sitting on the side of the bed. And I said, Grandma, what's wrong with you? And she just shook her head. She was like, baby, I don't know. She said, I don't know if I had a dream or somebody told me this. She said, but something, she said, I don't know. She said something about some kid. I don't know if they say he was preaching or wanted to preach and his parents didn't believe him or something like that, but I don't know. She said, but he and some other boy was somewhere. I don't, but maybe she said, I don't, she said, I'm probably going crazy. And what she didn't know is that God interpreted that call.
Yes, sir.
And I told her shortly thereafter, after I announced my call to preach, that her dream was really confirmation. So that Sunday, I would announce my call to preach, do 11 o'clock service. My mom was not at church that Sunday. She had to work. My mom was a LVN at Breckenridge Hospital. And so my pastor made several phone calls. The first call that he made was to my mom, and he just flat out told her, he says, Sylvia, he said, this boy's in my office. And she said, I'm letting you know now. He's been called to preach. He's ready. He's prayed. And he's going to announce it this morning. So my mom just, she was like, and I still get emotional when I think about it. She was like, I knew it was coming. I just didn't want it to, to come this soon. And so I talked to her on the phone, and she said, you ready? I said, I'm ready. I said, I got to do it. So after that conversation, my pastor started preaching under Dr. John Joseph Rector Sr. at Antioch in San Antonio. So he calls Pastor Rector, and he tells him, and what's going on. So he gets on the phone and he gives his congratulatory and prayers for me, and then the second call was to my cousin who was his first son in the ministry, Dr. Barry Jackson, who at that time was pastoring Sweet Home Church in Round Rock. And so, we were, that's family. So we're talking. And then the third one was my grandfather, the late Reverend J.W. Swisher, who pastored the Galilee Church in Kennedy. And he was like, son, I'm elated. He said, I'm not surprised. And, he just kind of encouraged me, and that's how it normally went. So after the sermon, and now mind you, I'm an usher. And so after the sermon, I don't I don't go up for the invitation to put the chair out. The other ushers they do that, and so after they did that, I go up, and after the invitation was song, the pastor asked, my statement, and I share with that statement. And something occurred that particular Sunday because there was a light in the sanctuary that had not worked in years. I'm talking about, I don't know if it was a short above or that, hadn't worked in years. And my cousin and my sister and I, we still talk about this. When I came up to the altar and sit down in the chair, and when I started talking, the light started flashing. It started flashing. And so then after I completed my statement, the light stayed on. And so that's something that we
Wow.
out as well. So here it is. I announced my call to preach, March 15th, 1987, during the morning worship service. So Pastor says, well, he will be preaching next Sunday, 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, 8 o'clock. So I'm on spring break, mind you. I'm on spring break. And Pastor, he had this thing. He says, no, I believe that man is called to preach, or anybody's called to preach, they need to preach as soon as possible, he said. And this is what my pastor did to me. And so I had a week to prepare my little first sermon. I said, so there's that. And so my aunt, who I just buried a few weeks ago, she was school teacher. And so she actually let me stay with her for about 3 days. I had my own little room. She set up a little room, makeshift desk with a light and all that. And I wrote my first sermon, and I would get on my bike, go to the south end of town, and let my pastor read my little manuscript that I wrote, on Genesis, because I talked about Adam and Eve and Noah. And my first sermon was entitled "Obeying and Disobeying," and the first time I wrote it, he didn't like it because I wrote it in cursive. He said, "Nah," he said, "Go back." He said, "Do it over." And so I wrote it. I wrote it over, and I still have the copies, mind you. So I printed it out and all that, and I took it back. He said, "Add more to it." So it was just kind of so. He said, "Don't come back, until you feel comfortable with it." And so I did, and so I preached my first sermon. Experience as a boy preacher was somewhat, difficult. You know, it was rough because even though I was a boy preacher, I was also a boy.
Yeah.
I had to grow up, as a boy, and of course, I went through the peer pressures and all of that, and I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be around, my friends and all, because I was, but then I realized, that I was still an 11-year-old kid, I was still an 11-year-old kid, and something that I appreciate my parents and my pastor, and also my family and also my friends is that they wanted me to be a boy,
Yeah.
and I was a kid, and so of course I love to still play outside. I still love to chunk rocks down the street, go to the river, throw, I was that boy, I was that boy. But I had to also know that when it came down to the ministry and also to the preaching moment, I had to also be serious about it And also in school, I had to realize that I was a boy. Once again, I was 11. I had not even hit teenage years yet. I was a boy. I mean, if I did something in school that I wasn't supposed to do, in which I was a bad student, I was tardy, sometime a lot. Hey, I would get written up. I mean, I would go to the principal's office. So I was a boy. I was a boy. I was a boy. My pastor and my parents, they never shielded me a lot, but they protected, my time and all, and I could not, take revivals during the school year out of town because, what I mean, I couldn't miss a lot of school. Then I was an athlete as well, but then once again, I was in the sixth grade, so that time progressed as well. And no matter where I was preaching on a Sunday morning or Sunday night, I had to be in school the next day.
Absolutely.
I mean, it wasn't no excuse because I was a boy. I was a boy, and I was also going to be a student. So
Yes, sir.
that was the that was the the boy.
So as you are starting in your ministry, you know, were there, I think you've said it, but were there a lot of opportunities that came to you, as you were starting, and
Oh
how
yeah.
did you grow yourself? What were the lessons that, your pastor taught you, or other preachers around you, as you say, even those you were related to? What were some of the lessons that you learned early as you're starting to develop, as you're starting to grow, and as you're starting to preach more even as a boy growing up? What were some of the keys takeaways, those lessons that you learned?
Well, the first key I learned is that I learned the stages of a preacher,
Yes, sir.
and this comes from my grandfather in the ministry, the late Dr. J.J. Rector, who passed it down to my pastor, that every preacher will first of all go through a popular stage. Especially a young preacher,
Hmm.
they're gonna be popular.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody gonna want to hear them. You're gonna have more invitations. That you're gonna turn some down. I mean, everybody, you are like a novelty, to people. I mean, everybody wants to hear the young preacher. I mean, or the new preacher. And you get invitations and all that. I'll get back to that, as well, because first of all, I never took an invitation out without my pastor clearing them. My pastor had to clear them. I mean, that's old school. That is never. And so I went through that popular stage, but then I I went from the popular stage to what is called the pitiful stage. When I say the pitiful stage, the phone is not going to ring all the time. You know, I mean, and so of course you're wondering, you know, why I'm not, why am I not getting invitations? I mean, and not per se out, but why I'm not preaching at home, which I'm a firm believer that your first service is to your home church, and you don't have to preach all the time. I mean, first of all, be a steward, be a student in Sunday school and Bible study, and attend auxiliary meetings. Be a tither, serve. Don't feel ashamed to read the scripture or pray. I mean, be a servant. Be a servant. So the popular, and then the pitiful, and then the unpopular, which there's nothing happening. I mean, of course you're off the radar and all of that, and but the way I survived and I navigated it, that is that I also knew who I belonged to. So regardless if the opportunities were not coming, I knew that I still belonged to the Lord, and I still had a job, you know, to do for Him. I mean, I still had, and so I navigate, and I'm trying to think of the question that you asked. I'm trying to connect it that you asked. How would I navigate it?
So what I was saying was, how are you growing
Oh, okay. Thank
in
you.
yourself? But before I get there, I want you to hit on what you just said, even for preachers now, whether young preachers, young pastors, even hit on what you just said about those three different stages. Because in other words, don't get so accustomed to being popular, because as you what you just said, big bro, is true. You can be popular, but then eventually that's going to fade, and sometimes you're for real on the island by yourself.
That is gonna fade out. Honest, that's gonna fade out until if you are not really strong in your commitment to the preaching ministry, you will sometimes question your call to preach. Because
Absolutely.
I've met some preachers, and I'm kin to some of them who just think, well, that their first ministry is just preaching. That's all they want to do is preach. And if they're not preaching, that they feel like that they are dealt a bad hand. And the ministry is more to me about being a servant rather than standing behind the pulpit and preaching. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
and so and so that is very important for any preacher to know. I mean, is that especially because even some preachers don't get opportunities that we got,
Hmm.
but it does not mean that you are not worthy of your call.
Yes, sir.
Everybody get opportunities. Some more than others. I didn't get the opportunities that other young preachers got, but I got a lot of opportunities. I mean, and I was blessed. Really, I was blessed with opportunities, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and so, but I knew that I had to go through that stage of being popular, and that stage of popularity for me probably lasted maybe 8 months, maybe a year. And then it kind of level off. I mean, I wasn't, because, you know, uh, preaching the youth revival and all of that. And you know how it is when you're a young preacher and the seven last saves
Sins.
and yeah, seven last saves and um, preaching for Sunday morning for church. I mean, those things they came and then it kind of leveled off. You really wasn't getting invitations, and so here once again the popular, the pitiful, in which I was feeling sorry for myself, and I'm like, hey man, that's neither here nor there. I mean, I'm still a servant.
Yes, sir.
And so I survived that. Now, as far as my growth, and as far as the preaching mentors I had, especially first of all my pastor um, made me read something every day.
Yes, sir.
I mean, of course, my Bible, but read the newspaper, stay up with current events,
Yes, sir.
have something in your hand, and also he made me write a sermon every week.
Yes, sir.
I mean, every week, and I tell you what, even when I wasn't going to preach, I mean, he wanted me to commit to writing a sermon every week. Something that I would like to share with you, Pastor Brown, is that I grew up with a speech impediment.
Yes,
I don't know
sir.
if you know this or not, but I stammer from time to time. I stutter. You may see some of it in this interview, but I stammer from time to time. But when I get behind the pulpit, that stammer gone.
Yes, sir.
However, when I give the benediction and I leave the pulpit, if you have a conversation with me, everybody say, you don't stammer. I stutter when he preach, but as soon as he say, now to him who's able, when he get out the pulpit, it's back. So I had a stammer. So, so in order to get past my stammering, I had to read out loud, and my pastor also, I had to, and it's good practice for any preacher, anybody, write word for word what you're going to say, read the manuscript, get it, internalize it,
Yep.
so where, yeah, and so that's how I kind of had growth. And here once again, another side of growth. Even though I was a young preacher, guess what? I was not beyond Sunday school. I
Yes, sir.
loved going to Sunday school. Didn't have to teach. I was a student. I loved being a student in Sunday school class. I was in the youth Sunday school class. Went to BTU and took every opportunity like that as well.
Well, but you also hit on something I was going to ask you later, but forget that. We're already here now. The
Okay.
importance of what you just said, big bro, about reading, about having something in your hand. I believe it was Charles Spurgeon who said a preacher should have the Bible and the newspaper in your hand. So the importance of reading, as you say, your pastor was saying, you need to read something every day. So even now, as we look at, where preaching is now, how we continue to grow as preachers, then just talk to us, us young pastors, young preachers, but talk to us in general about the importance of reading and how reading does indeed, enhance your ministry, enhance your preaching, but enhances your spiritual growth. And what type of books should we be reading?
I will say that, and I will also say that even at my age, and I'll be 50 in a few months, I want to get better on my reading. Now I read, but I don't read like I should read, so
Yes,
I'm
sir.
getting better. I read something, and what reading does, reading exercises your mind. I believe it exercises your mind. And also, reading also helps you prepare for lessons, prepare for sermons, because there can be something that you have read and also have internalized that the Lord will actually allow you to have total recall upon that. There's some stuff that I've read, I mean, as a kid. I mean, I'm talking about books as a kid, just, as a kid and even as a young preacher, that I can remember something in that book that is applicable to the sermon. One of the things that I think that you ought to read is that you should read something on meditation. You know, you ought to read something on meditation, something that's going to enhance your your growth. Read the celebration of discipline by Foster. I mean, something that's going to help you read historical books, read history. Read some poetry. Definitely read some books um, by pastors in our context. And I learned that the last several years. Read about pastors who have written something in our context that helps you to navigate through our context, because we do have some great black theologians, some great black writers. Read the early church fathers, read McLaren, read Spurgeon, read the Willard. Read something that's going to help you broaden your mind and also broaden your horizon. But definitely keep up with them now. The current events. Read Jet Magazine. Find out what's going on in the black community. Read people. I mean, just read something where not only you can have a conversation with somebody about what's going on, but also you can sharpen your mind. You can be articulate when you're writing something, and something that you have read that can also allow you to literally not only help yourself but also help others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as you are graduating high school, as you continue growing on this path of preaching, as you continue to be known, then talk to us about from high school to your first pastorate. That and then your, of course, the education that still takes place in that time. But talk to us from as you said, from high school to the first pastorate, and
Wow.
which is amazing, by the way.
Well, well, first of all, um, high school, the first pastorate. I graduated. I graduated from Bastrop High School in May of 1993. Now, I should say that I graduated in June of '94, but I graduated in May of '93, and I did that, because there is a mandated test in Texas called the TOS test,
Okay, yes, I
and
definitely remember that.
and uh, and uh, uh, and I am a recipient of failing the math portion by 1 point.
Mm.
Okay? And it got me. And so you start taking that TOS test actually your junior year.
Yep.
And so I could never get over the hump. And so I failed the the math portion by 1 point. And so mind you, you know, I couldn't walk with my class, but yet and still I was still off the record recognized. But I passed it in October of '93, mind you, but they still counted me as a graduate of May of '93. So I came back, walked in June of '94. Okay, but needless to say, in May, I I had ran into my cousin that lives lives in Carrizo Springs, Texas, and she was home uh, maybe for a reunion or something, taking care of her mother. But I ran into her. I worked at HEB. I worked at HEB. I was a tracker at HEB, and so ran into her, and I mean, she always gonna give me that hug and kiss, baby, how you doing? And all that stuff. And so she said, baby, pray for my church. Her church was in Crystal City, Texas, about 8 miles, um, 8 miles north of Cleveland Springs. She said, baby, our pastor's leaving and all, we just talking. She says, how would you like to come down and just preach for us, And I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't, that's cool, but so time went along and all, and of course didn't hear from him. In which my plans, I had two courses of plans I was going to take because I wanted to go to Morehouse, but now mind you, I had not officially graduated high school. Okay, that was the first plan. But then I was wrestling with going to mortuary school. I was going to go to Dallas Institute of Mortuary Science, and
Great school.
I was going to go and into that. I had a good friend and mentor by the name of Pastor D.B. Gibson, who was a mortician in my hometown. So he kind of encouraged me to do that. So mind you, we fast forward. So right around August, I see her again, and so they that church invites me to preach for them in Crystal City, Texas. But my my cousin Ron Moore, who I aforementioned, he was also their supply preacher, you know. So and they were leaning on calling him anyway, So I mean, but I went down preached in September on the fourth Sunday in September. I never shall forget. I rode the bus and I stayed the weekend. I preached for them, but come to find out that the church in Carrizo Springs, who was actually her husband's family, because it was a two family, it was family church. You had one group in Crystal City and one group in Carrizo Springs, and so their pastor had retired, and so it was almost like that two churches got two boys from Bastrop, Texas. So y'all pick one. We don't pick one. We'll pick. So Ron went to Mount Olive, Crystal City. I went to Macedonia, Carrizo Springs. So now here it is. So some of the people in Carrizo had heard me preach that September. However, they still wanted me to come back to Carrizo Springs. Here once again, I rode the bus back down in November. In November, a week before Thanksgiving. Matter of fact, it was 31 years ago this week.
Wow.
Yeah, 31 years ago this week, because it was leading up to Thanksgiving, right? And I preached in Beeville Call on that Sunday, on what are we, third Sunday? Yeah, I preached a Beeville call on the third Sunday of November, 31 years ago. So, of course, you can probably tweet that. 31 years ago this week, I preached a Beeville call, and I was watching Monday Nitro, WCW Monday Nitro, probably about the second week of December, and they told me that I had won the vote, and so,
Wow.
and so they had called, and so they called me. I kind of felt better about it because the blessing of it all was that I had already passed the TOS. I mean, I passed the TOS test. Matter of fact, my principal, James Richardson, and my guidance counselor, Dan Allen, who I talk to all the time, they came to HEB with my test score. They told me that I had passed. They said, congratulations, because they had promised me that if I had passed, that that they would buy me a steak dinner if I came back to graduate in '94, and so I did that. Now it was seven of us who who had come back after, but in a way I was the one who got the steak dinner. So don't tell my classmates that. But in a way, so that's what happened. So I get called my first church, you know, and it was pretty interesting. It was very interesting. My first church, they were a two Sunday church because my predecessor also pastored a church in Del Rio. The church in Del Rio thought I was going to accept that pastorate, but I didn't. I just accepted the one in Cleveland Springs, and I encouraged them that I was going to be moving to Cadizo. Didn't have a place to stay. My beloved cousins Alma and Bobby McNeil allowed me to stay with them. I stayed with them for about maybe 3 or 4 months until I found my own place, and it was rough. I had I had some lean days. I mean, it wasn't as it is now. The church could not afford to pay me a lot of money, and I was just happy to serve, man. I mean, I had a car. Sometimes I didn't have a car because my car would break. But man, it was a joy. It was a joy and a blessing because God does reward faithfulness. I was just happy just to have, a place to preach and to cut my teeth in pastoring. I mean, it was a struggle being an 18-year-old pastor. It was a struggle because I wanted to carry uh, the lessons I had learned from my pastor into my pastorate, and it was a different context, different culture, and things wasn't going that way. So I learned as I went along. I had to learn, how to pastor.
Right. I wanna just share something with those who are watching when Big Bro's talking about the toss test. So in Texas, from his experience and my experience in Texas, they had before you could graduate, it was tossed back then they changed it to the tax test. So you
Right.
had to pass math, science, English, and history before you could graduate. I can attest with him. He failed math. I failed science. I failed science for at least 2 years before I finally actually got my diploma. So I just wanted to share that with y'all about that. But as in your first pastor, you talked about it, some of the struggles, some of the things like that. Help those from your experience who are going into their first pastorate. What are some keys? What are some things you should do? What are some things you shouldn't do? But also, as you talked about it, even share some of your own experiences, whether they were good experiences or some mistakes. Just the cliff notes, just what you learned and what you could tell anybody who is new to the pastor about what to do and what not to do.
Number one, do not go in changing everything and expecting people to dance to your music. That, that's the first thing. Man, I went in and I was gung ho. I was gung ho. I want to change the world. I mean, after all, I was the pastor. Here once again, I grew up under a pastor that, hey, anything that the pastor said, well, that was my context. So I thought, hey, I do the same thing. So don't never never go into a place expecting that it's going to be your way immediately. Matter of fact, I would encourage any young preacher pastor, preach with conviction, pass with uh, uh, preach with conviction, and pass with affection. Get in there, love the folk, preach, teach, love, preach, teach, and love. And if it all works out, you know, they will give you the reins. You know, they will. But some churches do not want a pastor. Some churches just want a supply preacher. And so, you know, part of that, part of that is was that I had to learn that I was not that church's pastor. I was that preacher because their pastor had, I mean, he had been there for probably what 40 years. I mean, and he really didn't pastor per se because he didn't live there. But that's who they respected. I mean, you know, and so when I came to the Macedonian Church in Cleveland Springs, Texas, I mean, I was the new pastor. I was the youngest pastor. I moved up. They had never had anybody to live there, and so that's what you know what I was dealing with, and so uh, just go in and learn the culture, learn the context. Don't change anything, and don't try to bring from your home church what you think ought to be in your current because it's two different cultures. The Bastrop, Texas, I mean that's the Austin area. You know, I was going to South Texas, which South Texas, that area in 1993 was ranked number two on the poverty line in Texas. I mean, it's entirely different culture. I mean, different culture in everything. And so I would say, just be careful um, with that. And the next question, I'm sorry, I'm I was trying to.
Oh no, no. Just as you say, as you gave the lessons, but also from your experiences, just from that first pastor leading up to your second pastor, just that first pastor, if you could go back and like redo something, knowing then what you know now, what would be some of those things that you would redo?
The first thing that I would do in my first pastorate is that I would not have been so dogmatic, because I came in demanding respect. I mean, I thought I was 18, and you're gonna let me. I mean, I was young hope. And I never shall forget that one of my memories from a member who had just graduated from Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. Um, she um, she put me in my little 5 by 5 office. I have a small office, and she had her pocket diploma, and so she said she said until you get one of these, and so she was pointing to her degree. She said there's nothing you can tell me. And so I mean, needless to say, I believe that if I win the more humble, I probably would have had a better pastor if I go in but again, different context. I wanted that church to be something that they were not, and I definitely want to tell Pastor Brown because I don't know what's going on. Is it my camera or your camera?
Uh, I think that might be your camera.
Let me, okay, because I hit that. I'm to the point. Okay, let me see. Let me stop cam and try to get back started.
Okay. Hold on, y'all.
Okay, check them out. Okay, I think we're good. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
so I would have because that church That church called a meeting on me the week after I was installed.
Wow.
Yeah, they called a meeting. As a matter of fact, I told this story. I told this story to Bethlehem last Wednesday. They had a meeting on me um, a week after I was installed. I was installed on the third Sunday of March. They called a meeting on me that next week, and the meeting. I mean, it just now, I would have known about the meeting until one of the brothers who walked every morning. He came by my house early, man, like at 7 o'clock, and he was a good guy. He was the husband to one of my adversaries, and he said, Pastor, he said, I don't know if you noticed or not. He said, but they have the meeting on you this morning at 10. And I'm like, meeting about what? I mean, and I wasn't going to go, and I called my pastor. The pastor said, they called me. They said, well, you got to go. So I got up and went to church and all that stuff, and man, it was pretty good, pretty good number, of folks there. I didn't have a big congregation, but when I say pretty good number, I'm looking at maybe 25 to 30 folks. So they were there, and I go to the pulpit. I mean, this is something new to me. My first meeting called on me, and I went to the pulpit and I said, I understand that there's some of y'all upset about some stuff, and I just don't hear grievances. And so they had grievances such as I thought I was better than them,
Hmm.
because I wear suits all the time and all of that, and
Wait,
how,
because you wore suits all the time?
yeah, because I wear suits all the time. And once again, mindset, yeah. And they didn't like the fact that my family, and I'm the baby of my family. I have five. Well, I've got five sisters. My twin sister is a, but I've got sisters that spoil me. Okay, and 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 I see Pastor Clint Yancey on the set. Clint Yancey been knowing my family for the last 20 something years, 20 plus years, and anybody else who's on here. I've got sisters that spoil me. They still do. Matter of fact, my wife tells them that's y'all little brother. I know that y'all gonna do anything that y'all want. She said, I don't get in that. She said, anything y'all do, whatever. So they outfit me with stuff. I mean, with clothes, everything. And so they were upset because my mom and my sisters gave me gifts, suits and everything. And I mean, they presented me with stuff. And so I was trying to outdo them. The second thing they had against me was that they said that when our choir was singing, I sat there stoic. I wasn't saying amen, which is not true. I remember that. I was, I mean, and they said when my home choir got up, they said I shouted. I don't remember shouting. Okay, so another thing with that. Okay, here's the third complaint. Uh, my cologne is too strong.
Wow.
Yeah,
Are
man,
you serious?
I'm serious. I'm serious. And I remember, like, because my mom was an Avon guru. I mean, she loved Avon. So my mom would buy me Avon products, And at that time, I mean, I was wearing black suede, but oh yeah, and that was their complaint. And so after I heard their complaints, I asked if anybody else had anything to say. They said no. Then I closed the 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 meeting out in prayer, and I went my separate ways, and they went theirs, and that's it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That,
that was
that
something. Yeah.
wow, that's crazy. So then so they talked to us about how then from that experience, how did you get to your next assignment?
Okay, well, the Greater Mount Olive Church in Del Rio. The churches in that area, which was Mount Olive, Crystal City, Macedonia, Carrizo Springs, New Life, Uvalde, Greater Mount Olive Del Rio, and Mount Olive Kerrville and Barnett Chapel Kerrville, all, and there was a church in Pearsall. I can't remember the church in Pearsall, but they all had what is called a fellowship connection. I mean, it was unusual because anytime those churches had annual days, they would they would literally put the pastor of another church on program. I mean, in
Mhm.
order to get that, and not to preach, to read. I mean, to read scripture. I mean, anything like that. So, I mean, and it was something that I wasn't used to. But anyway, um, the way I got to the way I got to Del Rio, which Del Rio is, as far as commerce is concerned, as far as was really the best place financially, for a pastor, and I get into that here later on. But the way I got to Del Rio is that I I, I didn't visit the church. I visited another church. I visited my predecessor's former pastorate, New Light. New Light was actually installing their pastor in Del Rio. That church is now folded some years ago. But I was on program either to introduce the preacher, but they don't have a program, and so the Greater Mount Olive Church, of course, all of them were there, and so this was in '94, so I got invited to preach um, annual day here and there, and then went back, did a 3 night revival, and so but kept close connection with that church. That church, their pastor was a captain in the Air Force, and so he had received orders to transfer to North Korea in '96. Now his plan was that because he was going to be gone for 2 years, his plan was that he was going to supply the pulpit with his wife until he got back. The church didn't want that for some reason or another, and so they received his resignation and they opened the pulpit for for consideration for anybody who wanted to apply. I was actually engaged. My first wife is out that church, so I was actually engaged to be married, and I told them that if I was considered, do not consider me because I married a girl from the church. Let's keep it above board and all that. I want to be because I didn't want it to be said that he just got the church because he's marrying somebody from the church. That
Right.
was the case, and it was really a tight contest, I believe, if you would, between another senior pastor and myself because I didn't know I was going to be called. Honestly, I didn't know I was going to be called, but got called to the church. Got called to the church the first Thursday in October '96, and accepted the pulpit uh, third Sunday in October of '96.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So then talk to us about that experience. Now you've had some experience at your first assignment and now you're moving to your next assignment. So talk to us about the second assignment. Talk to us about how the lessons you learned from the first assignment that you incorporate into the second assignment, but also how did you continue to grow as a pastor, as a preacher, and how did you grow in your ministry with that congregation?
Well, I had to come in to Greater Mount Olive pastoring.
Yes, sir.
Number one, because my predecessor's wife split the church. Matter of fact, he split the church because they wouldn't let his wife, supply the pulpit and all. And so, needless to say, he split the church, and they organized the church downtown, and I had to go in. I had to go in pastoring, but in a way to keep people together. Okay.
Right.
Now, the difference between Macedonia, Cadizo Springs, Greater Monolith, Del Rio is that Del Rio is an Air Force city,
Yes, sir.
which means it's an Air Force, which means a lot of my members were servicemen and women, some active, some retired, who wanted leadership. So if I did not provide leadership, they
Right.
would let me know otherwise. And also move, moving from Carrizo Springs, which is an impoverished area, and coming to Del Rio, which is pretty much well set, is a big change for me financially. Because not only did they believe in taking care of the pastor the best way they could, but they believed that the pastor, in their words, was also CEO. And so I had to be on all bank accounts. I mean, it was pretty interesting. And here once again, I'm still growing in leadership and all, doing the best I can, and trying to preach, and having a pretty good time, because my crowd in Del Rio is different, okay, and it's different because I literally can have an evening service based upon the fact of people who could not come to morning. So I mean, I'm having a good time. I mean, it's a good time, and it allowed me to do some pastoral ministry. It allowed me to do some pastoral ministry. It also allowed me to burn out, because I became their overdoer than the overseer, because they depended upon me a lot. They really did not know what to do,
Hmm.
because I guess that that my predecessor, of course, since he was Air Force, since he was a captain, he kind of had that mentality. His predecessor really wasn't there for a long time, and his predecessor did not live in Del Rio, so it was kind of touch and go. But as growth would take place, I learned how to grow as a leader, and I learned that I had a mixture of of different classes of people. I mean, some that some that had not, but I did the term, because Del Rio had different neighborhoods. You had San Felipe, which was old Del Rio. Across the creek, you had Soneva Hills or Del Rio proper, and then you had the hills. You had Buena Vista. That's kind of the richest. I mean, it was pretty. It was pretty diverse. I mean, so it allowed me to see what I was accustomed to see, because even growing up in Bastrop, I kind of grew up kind of seeing that. So I was kind of back home still, and then it gave me the freedom to preach per se without a lot of stress, and kind of gave me the liberty to get out more. You know.
Well, and I think you said it. They allowed you to lead, but from what you described, you grew as a leader and you
Yeah.
grew as a preacher through that experience as well. And especially as you're saying, because some pastors come into different situations differently, and sometimes you don't, some pastors come in a situation and not necessarily always know what the culture has been, what has gone on, and what has happened prior to their arrival. So for you to come in, basically having to come into a church split and then having to really pastor this church, I think that speaks volumes. So then, just from briefly before we move on to how you got to Bethlehem where you are now, but give somebody some encouragement in that when you do come into a church that has been, whether it's been hurt, whether it's just wounded, those whichever way it comes, just how to even as a new pastor, how to preach, teach, and how to lead the people through, those hurtful times.
When you come into a situation like I did in Del Rio, because first of all, even the people that stayed, they were still either related or connected with those that split.
Mm-hmm.
So you still have relationships. I mean, and you can't take sides in situation. I mean, be kind, be nice. Um, don't never talk bad about your predecessor because you will soon be one. And I always uplifted my predecessor. I did not agree with a lot of what he did. Because I mean, my predecessor even told me uh, that I stole his church. I mean, I didn't agree with and and that and that he did not resign, but he was so it was like so. Be friends, love on the people because you still have to fellowship with them in one way or another. And so I was still friends with with he and his wife and some of the people that he took. Uh, those were people, I mean, who I knew. I mean, who I knew, and people that have respect for me, who I have respect for them. But I think that they were put in a situation to where they had to choose loyalty over longevity. I mean, this was their pastor for maybe 5 or 6 years. I mean, and I'm the new pastor. I haven't done anything wrong, but this is loyalty, and over here is longevity. So I mean, so once again, I just minded my own business. Um, I mean, I now something that I would say about the Greater Melodic Church in Del Rio. They were only a Sunday church. Even though you had midweek service, they would come to midweek. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was just what they were. I mean, so I mean, after seeing about maybe 95 to 100 people on Sunday, I would probably see about maybe 3 or 4 on Wednesday. So I mean, but I was still committed to that. And that's
And,
what yeah.
and help a pastor with that, because sometimes pastors, sometimes as pastors and just pastors in general, that can be a discouraging thing where you see a big crowd on Sunday, but you see a very small crowd on Wednesday. But the commitment to continue to be faithful, even in the midst of not seeing the large numbers. Talk to us about the importance of being faithful.
The importance of being faithful is that, and the Bible says it plainly, be thou faithful over a few, that be faithful over a few things, I'll make you rule over many. I believe in that. Uh, be thou faithful unto death. I mean, if you're faithful to the little, I believe that God will give you the lot.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes I didn't want, I mean, because I was also bivocational for a while in Del Rio because I was a paraprofessional, which I mean in the school district and also a coach as a district employee. So I mean, and in football season, man, it was rough because football practice. So I would leave football practice, no time to shower and all that stuff, change clothes, but I would immediately get to the church. And a lot of times I got upset because I mean I would rush, and thank God that my AD and head football coach who I worked for was also a preacher. I mean, because he had to be in church. So I mean, I would kind of get upset. I mean, hey, I mean, here I am. I mean, I'm rushing, back to y'all, and y'all don't want to come out, but I remain faithful, and I would teach as if I haven't full now. I would I would use this as a caveat. I mean, some people say they wouldn't come to Bible study because I couldn't teach. I don't know. I mean, I mean, some people say I can't preach, but for some reason, in the words of my big brother and dear friend, Pastor L.J. Gillespie Sr., for some reason I can't preach or teach, but the phone won't stop ringing. So I'm doing something right. So I mean, hey, I go on like it is, but I was faithful. And
Yes, sir.
so I encourage, I encourage the younger preacher that if you're enduring what I am enduring, be faithful. Don't try to morph your church into something that it's not. But if you be faithful, in the words of the late Dr. Ian Franklin from Austin, if you're faithful, God will provide promotion. And sometimes he will either move you to promote you or he will promote you right where you are. But be
Yes,
faithful. And I mean, for 37 years in ministry, 31 years as a pastor, and seeing the feast and the famines, more famines than feasts, I have remained faithful.
yes, sir.
And that's it. I've been faithful.
Yes, sir. Well, we definitely appreciate. I think that right there just helped a lot of us. And then finally, because there's a couple other things, but I want to get to this.
Yes.
Big Bro's
But,
been very kind with his
yeah.
time, so
No, I'm man, but you can ask me. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm looking
So
forward to it. Yeah.
so finally, where Big Bro he currently serves the Bethlehem Baptist Church of Beeville, Texas, where he's been over 20 years. So talk to us how you got to Bethlehem.
Well, I've been at Bethlehem for 23 years behind you. I see my good friend Dr. Keith Witherspoon say I pastor Big Bethlehem, but anyway, that's an inside joke between he and I. I keep telling him that South Bend has the biggest Bethlehem, but he don't believe me. But anyway, the
We're
way
gonna
I
pray. We're
got,
gonna pray for Spoon. We're gonna pray for Big Bro.
well, let's pray for Keith. But but the way I got to Bethlehem is that now I've been in Del Rio for about 6 years. I've been there for about 6 years, and Greater Mount Olive Church and Bethlehem were in the same association. Okay, now the Mount Zion Association. Now, ironically, my grandfather and the long tenure pastor, Dr. J.D. White, were best friends. Matter of fact, I've got pictures here in my office now of when my granddad was in the pulpit at Bethlehem in the old church and the new church, this church here, and also at the at the grand opening of this building. So this is kind of some kind of sentimental for me. But the way I got to Bethlehem, it's it's kind of funny. I say this. Um, I had invited my immediate predecessor, um, that was not my predecessor when I invited him. I invited him to come and install my offices in Del Rio
Hmm.
in January of '01. I had invited him to install my offices, and he called me back. He said, "Man," he said, "I wish I could." Well, at first he accepted it, and then he said, "Man," he says, "I was at a funeral down in South Texas," and he said, "And there's a church in Beeville that needs a preacher." I said, "Well, hey man, I understand." And so it was Bethlehem, I mean, and I had heard about Bethlehem even as as a kid and everything, because of the time of my grandfather. So be that as it is, they called this pastor um, a few months later, and so I'm preaching in the association that year in August, and the moderator of the association, Dr. B.T. Cherry, told me. He says, "Hey," he says, "have you talked to anybody from Beeville?" I'm like, "No, sir." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, they're looking for a pastor." I said, "What happened to so and so?" He said, "Oh man, he's going back to his former church in the Midwest." I'm like, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, man." He said, "He's gone." He says, "Now I know that you are satisfied being in Del Rio." Man, I was happy. I was doing well. I mean, I was working in the school district. I mean, making pretty. Church taking good care of me, man. I didn't have a care in the world. Country club membership. I mean, base membership. I mean, dude, I'm doing good,
Oh,
man.
so you was doing the big time, huh?
Well, I thought I was. Hey, I wanted to. I could look outside of my apartment balcony and see the golf course, man. I'm doing. I wasn't trying to live right on San Felipe Creek. Would take walks. I mean, I was at ease in Zion. Okay, churches on Main Street, man. I mean, I'm doing pretty good. And so it was, and so it was that um, what ended up happening is that I did not put in for Bethlehem. I didn't put it at all. What ended up happening is that right around November, I had consented to go preach. I mean, and you know what? I sent it back. I probably sent in the resume. I'm trying to remember if I did or not, but I know that I came down here to preach. Now, ironically, a couple of weeks before that, Bastrop had no. After that, Bastrop had played AC Jones High School in the playoffs, and I was there at the game. So I had seen these kids a couple of weeks beforehand. So that's another story. But anyway, needless to say, so I had um, um, I had come down November, second Sunday, November, to preach. And I was supposed to meet my church in Cuero. I was doing the church anniversary for a church in Cuero that Sunday. And it was so funny, Brown, that the bus forgot my folk. Now
Wow.
I don't know how this happened because we always charter the bus. Okay, the bus forgot them. So now, mind you, I didn't tell my church what. So I said I'll meet y'all in Cuero, y'all. Anyway, I was off. I was off. So came down here to preach, and I was always told, regardless if you preach at a vacant church or not, you get your stuff and you get out. Okay, I preached. Bethlehem had already decided to call somebody, but the moderator told, okay, well, at least let him preach. So, preach. So I preach, I get my stuff, I'm leaving. I got to be in Cuero at 3 o'clock. And so the chaplain of deacons stopped me at the door and Rev, he says, I know that we we've we've already decided to call somebody, but after hearing what we heard today, we probably need to reconsider. And so he said the pulpit committee would like to talk to you. Okay. I met with the pulpit committee and and we talked and they were telling me what they had to offer and all that stuff. Now I kind of had to pray about it because it's like when I looked at what they were offering, I was taking a dramatic financial beneficial pay cut to come here. I'm talking about I was leaving a lot behind. And so I never shall forget, God rest his soul, because I was determined. Now, I had made up in my mind that my time was over in Del Rio. I mean, I had taken that church as far as I could. I didn't tell them that. And so the late sister Elizabeth Ann Langley asked me, she said, well, we see that you work in the school district. I said, yes, ma'am. Because she taught school here for 55 years. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, but I said, if I come here, I'm not coming to teach school. I said, I can teach school in Del Rio. I said, I'm going to be your pastor. She says, well, knowing what you know now about what we can do for you, why would you even come here? And here's what I told her, and I stick to this today. I said, Sister Langley, if I don't come to Bethlehem in Beeville, I said, the Lord will not bless my ministry.
Gotcha.
I said it just like that. Now, mind you,
Wow.
and I said it because my work in Del Rio Brown had become mundane. I mean, it was just I was going through the motion, everything, I mean, and it was just mundane, and
Wow.
I was about to remarry, so you know what I mean. Now I was ready, to go ahead and suffer it to be so, to have my ex-wife and new wife, you know what I mean? It was, you know, my 5-year-old son was still there. So, you know, I mean, I was ready for whatever, you know, I was ready, but I knew there was time, and the Lord told me, now it was rough, but if I could take care of you in Del Rio, I definitely could take care of you in Beeville. Now, mind you, it was rough, but the Lord is faithful. And so that's how I got to Beeville. Beeville, Bethlehem voted on me when we were at the state convention board meeting in Victoria. The first, now I didn't know what was going on, but it was people coming up to me telling me, "Hey, boy, got the church in Beeville don't vote on you tonight." I'm like, "It is." I mean, I didn't know what was going on. And the late Dr. C.C. Robertson Bass Street, and our former national president came up to me. He said, "Boy," he said, "I hear church is voting on you tonight." I had no idea, but some of the members was at the meeting. I didn't know, and so a former member of theirs came up to me, and you know, I was on the home mission board of our convention, and so I'm at the table. He says, "I know you. You do?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "And there's a church." He said, "Up the road in Beeville, who gonna be voting on you tonight?" I had no idea. So I I got word because they had called me that they had voted, but I did not get 3/4 of the vote. Okay, I won the vote, didn't get 3/4. So they have now I've never heard this happening, but they did it. They had a special call meeting the week of Christmas, and it closed out the day after Christmas, which was the 26th of December.
My
And
birthday, by the way,
what Christmas Day of 26th.
26.
Okay, so I had gone home for Christmas, and I believe that Christmas that year was on a Thursday. I I know for a fact I'm good with dates and times, and so a friend of mine said that I should write a paper on history. So anyway, I preach our Christmas service at home every year. And so I got up that morning, and I always had coffee, coffee with my mom, you know, Christmas day before we went to church. And so she says, you know, she says, there's something on your mind. And she says, and I'm gonna go ahead and be mama right now. She says, there's a church calling you, and you struggling with saying yes. And I'm like, how do you know? You know, she says, Eric, she says, I'm your mother. And she says, not only do I know Eric, my son, I know Eric, the man of God. I mean, just, and
Lord.
so I tried to get, I said, Mom, I said, yes. I says, I'm up for another church. I said, and I'm going to have to make some decisions. And so she said, just pray about it and all that. And, you know, so needless to say, we had gone through all that day. And so on the next day, they had closed the voting. I got a call from Chairman of Deacons on the 26th, 7 o'clock. After the vote, he says, Pastor Tarver, he says, uh, based upon the votes, you are our pastor if you accept. And I had some, I, I had to do a lot of praying. Chris, I do a lot of praying because we were doing well in Del Rio. We were actually about to go to two services
Wow.
in 2002, 8 and 11, because once again I had some service people that could, you know, and so with all these plans, and I never shall forget. I had to pray, because I did not give Bethlehem an answer then. I wanted to be sure, but I could still hear, you know, I can bless you in Beeville like I blessed you in Del Rio. And I will say, God, because every success I've had in ministry, I'm talking about every success, you know, God did it from right here. I mean, now He blessed me in Del Rio, but I mean, I made some major milestones. So and so it was that after I got through, and the house was pretty full that Sunday, and they were. I remember that the announcing clerk, she got up, she said, and don't y'all forget, she says next Sunday we start off with a high time because we going to early service, so y'all be ready. And I'm like, I'm sitting down, I'm like, and here I am, I'm about to resign. Preached and opened the doors of the church. A couple of folk came to join, and then after that, I had everybody to sit down and read my letter of resignation. And there were tears on my end. There were tears on their end. There was some anger. Um, it was not a good day for me. I mean, it was not a good day. But I knew I had to leave, and so here I am, 23 years later, and God has made a way out of nowhere. It was tough. I left a lot, but God has been faithful, and I'm blessed. I want to say that I am blessed here at the Bethlehem Church in Beeville. I'm really blessed. I'm blessed. I thank God for the mountains, the valleys. I mean, I think, but I'm blessed. Um, I am the FDIC at the funeral home where I've been for the last 20 years. That I mean, hey, I'm in the community. God is good, but it it took a while, you know. And I'm not just looking at the financial part of it. I'm talking about just to have a church, that they are not where they should be. They're not where they used to be, but they're getting to where they can be, you know. And 23 years, the youngest pastor ever in the history of this church. And when I got called here, and I was 26, and people gave me 3 months because they said I was going to use this church as a springboard for greener pastures. I could have been gone, had opportunity to leave, but Bethlehem, and as I tell Bethlehem, when I got here, I was known. When I got here, y'all were known. My two previous churches were not known as what they were exposed, because of my influence. But hey, God has really blessed me in the Bethlehem Church.
I don't even know where to go from there because that no, because in all seriousness, that's a powerful, powerful testimony. As you said, about being faithful, about serving. Um, as you continue on this course, and so you've been there 23 years, and as you talk about that, as you've expressed that about how the Lord has blessed you, but as you said, you heard the voice of God specifically tell you to make that move. And
I
so
have,
and
yeah,
so I think that in of itself is where you're blessing so many people, because there are people who sometimes feel like they're at that crossroads, or feel that fear, like if I do leave, if I do go somewhere else, what I'm giving this up, I'm giving that up. But as you say, you do have to indeed trust in the Lord, to you know to continue on that path. So as you said, that the power of trusting in God, and to really believe the conviction that you have that God will take care of you.
yeah, you had to, cause man, let me tell you something. I I did not say this, but I should have said it. I was sitting in the pulpit at the Greater Mount Olive Church one Sunday morning preparing to preach. As a matter of fact, the choir was singing. And I tell the story all the time. And I had an out of body experience. I mean, I don't tell this to everybody, just that the Lord literally lifted me up out of my chair in Del Rio. And it was like a time, I mean, and set me right behind the pulpit in Beeville. And I'm like, my body is worshiping in Del Rio, my mind's in so it's like that out about. And so then by the time it got for me to preach in Beeville, it's like I came out of the Beeville situation and I was put back in Del Rio, and I preached. I mean, it so. And that was, I mean, it was kind of convicting to me. I mean, it because God is not going to bless you where He does not endorse you to be.
Mm.
And I believe that. Matter of fact, I'm going back. I'm going back to Del Rio. I was just there last weekend for a coaching reunion for some friends of mine that we got together and we had a reunion. I'm going back there Saturday for a funeral, and because of request of a sweet member of mine that asked me to come back and do a funeral. But and I've had opportunities to go back to Del Rio. I have gracefully declined. I mean, it's not where I need to be. I'm supposed to be here, and and I look at that. I mean, I'm supposed to be right where I am. And they
And
know
let,
that. Yeah, yeah.
and let me say, you're doing a fantastic job, and we all are the better about watching your ministry. So then, just talk to us about and these are I'll just throw these out there. You can hit them the way you want. Just talk to us about the importance of education for the preacher, the
Oh,
importance of growing as a preacher, and just talk to us about doing effective ministry even though you're not in necessarily a big city.
let me hit it on for the importance of education in ministry. In the words of the late Dr. Marvin C. Griffin, that was on me. Go to school. In the words of my good friend and brother Arthur Lane, Clark Griffin, go to school. B.W. McClendon, St. James Austin, McKinley Jackson, I see on the chat, go to school. And I have the late Dr. G.B. Clark. I mean, just mentor. I mean, just friends and mentors. Go to Philip Porter, George Parks, Jameson Hunter, my own cousin, Murray. I mean, don't go to school, and they emphasize that because they said that school helps you. It not only helps you mentally, it helps you in ministry, especially because it it prepares you to be either to move or to grow where you are. So, and I will confess, I did not get back into school until I was about 35, 36, because I went, yeah, I just got my DMin, and I went through, I went through 12 years continually of school. So, because I went to mortuary school first, and I never shall forget somebody said, "Man, said the Lord ain't called you to bury no dead folk. Shoot, the Lord called you to preach to the living. Man, get your behind in school." And so, um, it is very important to go to school, and you're never too old to go, and you always have time to go. You will make time for what you want to make time for. I did. My indictment was I didn't have time. Part of that was laziness. I knew, and like I say, so once again, I would not have gone back to school unless I was in Beeville, because it took me to get to Beeville to go to school. And I'm talking about even from finishing up. I mean, well, getting my certificate in ministry, diploma in ministry, um, the going into the bachelor program and then the master's and then ultimately a DMin. I mean, it all happened right here from Beeville, Texas. So that's the importance of school. Don't don't depend on your good looks, your suits, your voice, and emotional. I mean, all the time. You need to have some learning to burn. And I, as a young preacher, and also with somebody that had learning disability, I am dyslexic. Okay, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I have attention deficit disorder. Okay, I was sitting daydreaming class, so I had learning disabilities. I had a speech impediment. I've got a file that is probably still in the special education department in Bastrop ISD. However, my mother never let the school district put me in special education classes. She did not believe in modification. She said he's going to do the work because it wasn't so. And that's another one who make me read every day and kind of read something. And so, anyway, so education is very important. You know, get in school, learn something. If you if you refuse to go to school, at least try to educate your mind. You know, do something, but go to school because it does look good in the long run. Not saying it will get you a better church, but it will make you a better person. You know, I do believe that, and I thank God for all the ones who mentored me, friends and colleagues alike, mentors, teachers, everyone that encouraged me at education. And that next question is again,
I just talk to us about growing in preaching.
oh, going in preaching. The way that you grow in preaching is to preach, read books on preaching, and then listen to good preaching. You know, surround yourself with good preachers of all styles. I'm talking about in our context, in the white context, just get around good preaching. It is one of the things that I love about me is that not only do I love preaching, I love preachers, and I surrounded myself with preaching. I mean, cassette tapes, of preaching. Learn the different styles of preaching. I mean, I wasn't a hooper. I wasn't, but I love to listen to the C.L. Franklin tapes, to the W. Leo Daniels. I mean, Dr. F.D. Sampson is a mentor of mine. I mean, he and my pastor are great were great friends. Dr. R.A. Williams. I mean, that kind, learn, styles of preaching. The Gardner C. Taylors, the William Augustus Jones. I mean, there's a plethora of preaching that we have. I mean, and just in order to be a better preacher, I believe, and grow in preaching, you need to be around preaching and also preach while you're around preaching. The Joel Gregory's of the world, the Doug Jackson. He was one of my seminary professors. I mean, I could call out the list of those who have influenced me in preaching, even those younger than me who became mentors. George Parks, Jameson Hunter, Philip Corner, McKinley Jackson. I mean, those were my contemporary, my friends. Arthur Lane, L.J. Gillespie. I mean, E. Thurman Walker. I mean, that's you just get around preaching, in order to appreciate good Clint Yancey's a good preacher. I love listening to Clint. I mean, those guys are great preachers. Keep with us. I mean, get around the preaching, the Glenn P. Taylors, the MC Walkers. I mean, I can't, the Dr. G.B. Clarks. I mean, those men, those persons, they were inspiration in my preaching. My pastor is a preaching hero, of mine. He was not an expository preacher, but he was a hero of mine. I mean, he taught me the nuts and bolts of preaching. So I appreciate him. I will never call another preacher pastor my homiletical hero before I give credit to my own pastor because that's where I learned. I built upon that. Just I can name, but I can't. I mean, I've got influences, man. That my cousin Bashawn Jackson. I mean, his dad Barry Jackson. Just a whole lot of just a lot of influences. But yeah.
Absolutely, big bro. And then also the other question was, talk to us about, from your experience about doing big ministry and necessarily not a big city, because you don't have to be in a big city to do big things as relates to ministry.
You don't have to be in a big city, but but there is something that you can offer where you are, and it is just really getting in there, learning. Here once again, the culture and the context of the community, and just getting in, even if it's passing out groceries or toys for Christmas, or having something at your church to draw youth in, just something, because regardless of the size of you, uh, because regardless of where you are, you can do ministry. You can do big ministry in a small town, because I believe that that the church where you are, God has allowed that church to position itself to do what she needs to do in order to be impactful. And you also have to teach your church that regardless of the size that we are, there is no excuse for doing ministry. I had to tell Bethlehem that, because Greater Olive was big enough to do it and wouldn't do it. I mean, they were satisfied with. I mean, hey, let's come on Sunday. Let's make budget. Let's give a little money. Let's go home. Bethlehem had a desire to do ministry, and she's doing a great job. I mean, once again, she's not the biggest church, but she does what she does in the community, because the community looked to the church for that. And here once again, Bethlehem was kind of the headquarters, not only of the black community, but also just for a community in whole, because uh, the community looks for the black preacher, I mean, in the community, for advice, for prayer, for counsel, and it's just one of those, and the community, and since we are the only African American church in Beeville, our worship experience, I mean, our community likes that. So go figure. So I mean, it is very important that we do ministry, as well outside of these four walls.
Absolutely. Well, big bro, thank you. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything else on your heart? Anything else that you want to tell us?
I'm just Pastor Brown. I'm just glad that you know you have allowed me to be on, and I'm also glad that you consider me a mentor. I had no idea that you did. I have admired you from afar. I've watched you, and I appreciate your ministry, and to see the work that the Lord has allowed you to do in your church and also abroad. But to hear that I mentored you, that makes me, first of all, it makes me feel honored. Secondly, it makes me feel old. Uh, but but in the words of Dr. McKinley Jackson, he would say, Tarver, we are the older preacher now, okay? We are 50, okay?
Yeah.
We're not in our teens anymore. He's not. And so I'm just glad that you have allowed me to come on here and share my experience. Um, I'm honored. I'm honored because I know that you've had other conversations with other clergy, and I mean, I just appreciate it, and I just thank God for having. I see what Caldwell said, that he won't call out the names of heavy preachers. Man, I missed a lot of influences that I could have named. That's why I don't like naming preacher pastors, because there have been many that have influenced me, and I just appreciate just being on here, and also being allowed to share my story. And if I have said anything that was not timely, please let me know. If I said too much or didn't say, said too little, just let me know. But I have appreciated just being on here, and I hope that I have helped. some younger preacher in their context, and I hope that I've just just been a help, really. And
Yes, sir.
young preacher, pastor, wherever you are, appreciate your assignment. I mean, just thank God for it. Just that's all I can say. And the Lord will move in a mighty way.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. Of course, yes, I see McKinley and Caldwell, two of my other big brothers and friends and mentors as well. So no, we thank God for them. But also tell everybody where the church is, tell everybody where they can find you. So they're ever in the Beeville area, they know where to go.
Well, we don't have a website. We used to have a Facebook, but that's another story. I won't get into that. We're trying to, like I say, man, we have a lot of work to do. Um, Beeville is situated in the coastal bend area, not Belleville. Belleville is near Brenham and Austin. Don't go to Belleville. Beeville is situated right between Corpus Christi and Victoria, 59, 77. That's where Beeville is. I am right off of Highway 59, which is Corpus Christi Street, the main drag, and you can find me at 108 North Burke Street, and we have our Sunday school starts at 9 a.m. Our church school starts at 9. Our morning worship starts at 10, and we have a very good worship experience for about 70 minutes, maybe 80 minutes. I don't time, but of course we love that worship experience, and we fellowship, and then we go home. On Wednesday evenings, we have midweek service at 6 with a fellowship meal and Bible study. But you can find me in Beeville, Texas. If you happen to need to reach me and I'm not at the church, you can come by the Trevino Funeral Home. I may be at the funeral home. I may be in that office, but Beeville is small enough. I'm pretty much easy to reach. And if you just happen to see somebody, and if I'm in town, I'm looking for Pastor Tarver. They'll tell you, oh, he's either at the funeral home, at the church office, or at the El Hardin restaurant that's right next door to the church. Our church is multicultural, um, um, multiracial, and also missional. Multicultural because we have not only African Americans, but we also have Anglos and Hispanics, and of course multiracial because of that. And we're missional. We believe in mission in Beeville and abroad. So we're doing the best that we can. And as we say at the Bethlehem Church, we are hooked on the book and we are family. And I love them dearly. And thank you so much, Pastor Brown. Thank you.
Oh man, no problem. Listen, I'm gonna ask you to stay on just for a minute. But listen, God bless you all. Thank you so much. As I always say, like, comment, and share. Make sure, big bro, you share it on your page as well. So we look forward to seeing you with the next conversation, and we pray you've been blessed today. So God.